What's up everybody, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be getting down and very dirty with the Speedgoat from Hoka One One. We review a lot of running shoes here at Gearist, and there are a couple brands that don't show up very often, and Hoka is definitely one of those since we've had it only one other time on the site and it was not reviewed by yours truly. I should point out that Hoka is by far the most requested shoe brand for us to review, so I am very excited to bring this guy to you today. Named for and designed with heavy input from Karl Meltzer, whose nickname just happens to be, you guessed it, Speedgoat. This shoe right here is meant to tackle all sorts of trails and go long and hard on them. So I was very excited to get this on my feet, take it out on some of my backyard Colorado trails here, and get it very dirty and very toughened up. So without any further ado, let's break down the Speedgoat and see what I thought. As with all the running shoes we tackle, the first thing we're going to talk about is the very extremely dirty outsole, which you can see right there. This thing has not been cleaned off since the last run I took in it, but that's okay. It means it's been used and you know it. First off, this is a full contact outsole. You can see here there are no cutaways on the medial or lateral side. This bad boy is straight up all over the ground, which means you can feel a little bit of that rocker sort of thing underfoot. The rubber on this shoe is made from sticky and very durable Vibram rubber. Now, if you thought that Vibram only made 5 fingers, you were wrong. They're extremely well known and very long lasting rubber brand that's been out there for years, been to the top of Mount Everest. Pretty much every expedition that's been to the top of Mount Everest has had Vibram rubber on it. So this is an extremely durable rubber shoe, and in this case these lugs are set up in a 4mm deep lug pattern. On all kinds of trails I found this thing to be really great. The durability and the grip was excellent. The one place I found a little bit of a challenge, and this is not exclusive to this shoe, this is a 4mm deep lug thing, those just simply aren't the longest lugs in the world, is that when you get on some looser terrain, you do tend to notice that it doesn't grip quite as well because they're not cleat-like, they're not going to dig down in there. And that's no big deal. Again, we've reviewed tons of shoes that have about a 4mm deep lug, and this is no different. But these lugs I do think are very well designed. Now, they are designed to look like the Hoka kind of logo. You can see there the O with this little bird-looking thing on it. Those are the way that the lugs are shaped, as you can probably see there, maybe not. But these lugs are shaped like that, and it actually works out as a really nice lug shape that I like because it has a great amount of grip. Now, going uphill, these are oriented backwards, so the wings are kind of this way, going back this way on the shoe, and this way they're kind of up on the shoe so that as you go downhill, you're going to stick into those into the ground a little bit better. A very aggressive lug pattern, and I actually really like the way that it stuck to everything except for that loose terrain where it had a little bit of issue, but on groomed stuff, on rocks, really great grip. As I'd expect from Vibram rubber, and as I'd expect from a shoe designed heavily with influence from Karl Meltzer, a guy that's known for crushing 100-mile races, this shows pretty much little to no wear after about 40 miles of running in it. So it's really impressive, the wear of this. I really appreciate the durability of that a lot. Now let's move on to the midsole. From its inception, the midsole of Hoka's has kind of been the crux of their technology. They've got very high stack heights, very bouncy foam, and the Speedgoat is no different. Since it's such a standout, kind of a visual standout, let's first talk about the stack height of the midsole, which measures 33mm in the heel and 28mm in the forefoot for a net drop of 5mm. With this much stack, there's really no need for, much less room for, a rock plate in there, and even on some really jagged terrain, while you can feel the rocks, you certainly don't feel any poke through, which is nice. The material of the midsole itself is made from injection molded EVA foam, and I have to be honest that going into this, I expected this shoe to feel actually quite marshmallowy, but I did not get that at all. I found the foam really kind of resilient and bouncy, and I thought my foot was going to sink into it quite a bit, and I didn't feel that at all. It really stayed on top of the platform and kind of just let it ride there. Now, I can't speak for anything over, obviously, that 40 miles or 50 miles or so, but so maybe over time it wears in. If you guys have been running in Hoka's a lot, let me know, over time, do you notice yourself sinking down in there more? Leave me a comment down in the comment section below and let me know. And while you're at it, give us a like and a favor on this video. Another thing that was a pleasant surprise about this was the flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, the forefoot flexes quite nicely up here. When you get to about right there, right under the arch, it stops being quite so flexible, but if you're really kind of hammering down on it, you can still get quite a bit of flex out of that. And I thought the midsole material would compromise that quite a bit. And while it certainly limits it some, it's not nearly really what I thought it was going to be. Now, one of my biggest concerns with this shoe and the stack height that it presents is the fact that with being that high off the ground, you're kind of an ankle roll time bomb waiting to happen. However, I have to say that I never actually felt that. I never had anything that made me roll an ankle or anything like that. The first thing you can notice is that as we look from the back, the lower part, the midsole here, is quite a bit wider than the upper. So this creates a bit of stability that keeps you kind of from falling over. One of the things that is worth pointing out, though, in my experience, and I'm not the only person to notice this, is that the lateral side of the shoe, that would be the outside, the little toe side of the shoe, is softer and not as built up as the medial side, kind of the inside of the shoe, and so you notice a little bit of lateral instability. Now, this isn't really a huge deal. I didn't have anything come of it, but again, it's one of those things of confidence on trails. And again, there are lots of people, including Karl Meltzer himself, that are crushing races in the shoe without breaking ankles, so who are we to judge? Now, moving on to the upper, the first thing that you notice here is, what do these colors look like? They look like Red Bull colors, man, and that is because Red Bull is one of Karl Meltzer's main sponsors. I love it. It may be kind of a big sponsor shout out, but I love it. It's a cool colorway and it sticks out really nicely. Now, the main body of this guy is made of a fairly open single layer mesh, which is actually pretty breathable. And that mesh is supported by two layers, kind of an internal and an external welded overlay, bonded overlays that really keep the shoe together. I found the mesh to be really quite breathable and actually drains well. I went through a little bit of water with this, though what you can see is that there's pretty much a rand style construction all the way around the bottom of this, so while it might drain well out of the top, you're not necessarily going to get much water out of kind of the midsole, this area right down here, just because there's an overlay that goes the entire circumference of the shoe. This also adds a lot of durability to the shoe when you're really asking for that lateral strength, for that kind of side-to-side agility that you might be given to this on certain trails. One of the downsides of this mesh, in that it's single layer and doesn't really have a finer mesh backing, is that debris, fine debris, and then even not so fine debris can get in there. Now, I didn't really notice this being a huge issue for me, though on runs of about an hour and a half and longer, I did notice myself having to stop and kind of shake out my shoes. The upper is actually fairly flexible, though down here, as I mentioned again, especially as we get up into the toe, there's a little bit less give. It doesn't really allow the foot to do too much. We're going to get into this a little bit more in a second, but you know, it's just a generally pretty fairly flexible mesh. The design of the tongue on the Speedgoat is a really interesting one. You can see it kind of starts pretty normal. It goes through the throat here, but then rather than stopping here at the bottom of the throat to transition into the vamp, it actually continues on down pretty much to the toe of the shoe where it meets this toe bumper down here. The tongue design actually worked really well for me, kept things nicely in place. I did not notice any tongue slide. There are two channels for the laces to go through up here, and the interior, the microfiber, which is on the back side of those bonded overlays, it's actually pretty comfortable in the foot and would make for pretty decent sockless running if it weren't for the open mesh letting in debris. And even for those that want to kind of deal with the debris and run sockless, you could probably do so pretty comfortably in this. The heel counter of the Speedgoat is actually fairly flexible. It's topped by this nice pull tab right here. Then the foam right around the collar is a little bit more than it needs to be. You can see that's quite a bit of foam, and while it is certainly comfortable, I feel like you could shave just a little bit off that, lose a fraction of an ounce, and just save some weight here and there. I found that the upper of this shoe worked really well in concert with the midsole, and that's mainly because that midsole, again, has that higher stack height. You have this perceived instability. Then there's a little bit of lateral weakness on this, which causes you to feel like you're going to roll a little bit. But because of this rand style construction, it does keep you a little more secure, with a secure feeling, especially in the back, because it comes up over the midsole here, over the upper rather. So the foot actually rests right about here. So you can see that this amount of foam, which amounts to about maybe ½ inch, quarter of an inch or so, is actually up and around the back of the foot, which is a nice addition. Again, it's going to give you that nice shaped heel cup and make you feel a little more security in there. Now, before I start talking about the fit, I'd like to put out a caveat to everyone, and that is to say that no two people's feet are the same. So what I experienced might be, and probably will be, different than what you will experience. Now, with all that said, the fit of this shoe was not great for me. First, sizing. This worked well for me in terms of sizing. I was very comfortable with my industry standard size 11. However, based on other factors, which I'll talk about in a second, second, I can see people maybe making a decision to go up by a half size. In the rear foot of the shoe and the heel, I had no problems. As I mentioned earlier, that midsole coming up around the outside of the heel cup makes a nicely shaped heel cup and really did a nice job for me. So no real problems there. Moving into the midfoot here, I didn't have much problem here either. The one thing that I would point out is that these are very kind of narrow laces, almost like real spaghetti, or linguine pasta noodles. But what I would probably want to see there is a lay flat lace or something a little bit wider, because if you're somebody who likes to really hammer down on the shoelaces, this might cause some uncomfortability. I don't know it, but it might. And you shouldn't be tightening your laces down that much anyway, but that's another thing for another day. The rear foot of the shoe fit me well. The midfoot is good. It's fine. It works fine, but it is obvious by that point that it is trending toward narrowness in the forefoot, and that is exactly what happens. This shoe is narrow, and I am not the only one that is saying this, believe me. It fits very narrow, and Hoka's had some fit issues with this in the past, and I should say that I do not have wide feet at all. There is some vertical wiggle room in the toe box for your toes to go up and down, but there is pretty much no room for splay or anything like that, which kind of got to me a little bit. In all but one of my runs in this shoe, I did wind up getting hot spots. Now on this foot, the left foot, what it mainly felt like was right behind the ball of the foot. On the left side there was a very big hot spot, and it felt like it was buckling of the fabric, but as you can see there's no real buckling of the fabric, so I'm honestly not sure what was going on. And then also on my pinky toe, but on the right foot, I don't have that shoe here right now, but on the right foot on the pinky toe, there was also a pretty substantial hot spot, again on all but one run, and that actually wound up culminating in a blister on that toe for me. Now right there, it wasn't a huge deal. It was a blister that kept me from running for a couple days, but again, this is where it's important to realize that what happened for me is not necessarily going to happen for you, so it's worth trying on to see what your opinion is of this. If I'm being honest, I do think that the upper of this has some good things going for it. There's a good construction, the quality seems good, the ground rubber toe bumper is nice, it could be a little bit firmer. There's some good pieces here, but the execution is not great. It's just too narrow, to be honest. Now that we're past that odd uncomfortableness, yeah. Let's talk about the ride of the Speedgoat. I run in a lot of shoes, like a lot of shoes, and it had always been my impression, I don't know why, that I was going to be getting into a super squishy shoe where it's going to have no proprioception and no ground feel or anything like that, and that was absolutely not the case in this shoe. First is the ground feel. Now, I mentioned earlier that when you're on sharp rocks or something like that, you can certainly feel them, but you don't feel the jaggedness, and that is the case. It is impressive, though, that you're aware of what's going on the ground to some degree. Again, you're not going to get the feel out of this that you are out of something much more minimal, but it is impressive for this much stack to still be able to feel the ground like that. Second, the midsole material of this is actually really bouncy and kind of makes you want to just bound through the forest like a moron, and believe me, I definitely did that. Like a moron. It's a very active and very responsive ride. I really did enjoy the feel of these shoes, and I'd be curious to take it up to 20 miles or so. I wonder what happens past that. I've had them up to about 14 and felt pretty confident. I mean, I can't see them exactly deflating after 20 miles or so, but I would be curious to take it that long if it weren't for the fit getting in the way of that. The agility is also pretty decent. Again, this is a shoe with a lot of material, but a men's size 9 still comes in under 10 ounces at 9.7 ounces. Again, the slight wonkiness in the kind of stability department, not really stability like a motion control shoe, but like just being a stable shoe, is a bit weird. So just be careful if you get very excited, you go bombing down a tree, you're like, boingy boingy, this is so exciting. Just be aware of that stability factor. The Hoka One One Speedgoat is an interesting juxtaposition of things for me. It's a lot of good pieces that are there, but the bad stuff leaves those good features kind of hanging out to dry. I feel like the execution of this is not great, but the ingredients are there for a solid shoe. So I would be very curious to see what version 2 looks like. As for pricing, the Speedgoat comes in at $140, which, while not cheap, is what I would expect to see from a shoe like this in terms of being at the top end of those price ranges. The idea of this shoe really intrigues me, and I'm not the only person out there that wants to see this shoe work. Now, it is encouraging that younger brands like Hoka, they really do a good job of listening to people like me, to people like you. They listen to the consumer and what they have to say. And there's some pretty loud voices saying that this thing does not work in terms of the upper, but there's some great aspects to it. So I really hope that Hoka takes those, goes back to the drawing board and comes out with a version 2 that really kicks some serious ass. Before we give you the question of the day, don't forget to like and favorite and subscribe to this channel. Thanks so much. And here is our question of the day for you. What Hoka One One shoes have you guys tried? Have you tried any of their trail shoes, or has it just been road? And if you have tried their trail shoes, has it been the Speedgoat or something else, or both? Let us know down in the comment section below. Guys, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us today. If you've got any questions for our Ask Gearist segment or about this shoe or anything else, don't hesitate to let us know. You can do so by emailing info@gearist.com or leaving a comment down in the comment section below. We love hearing from you guys. As always, please follow us on all our social media outlets, which you can see right here on my right, your left, including our subscribe to YouTube button down there in the bottom right hand, your left hand corner. Thank you guys so much for spending a few minutes with us today, and we will see you next time.